we are a team of 4. Our volunteer team is most of us in here today in this call. So here's our amazing tribe who made the Android Study Club dreams come true. So it is really important for me to work with this amazing woman. Gauri will be leading the session, so I will introduce Gauri next. So myself, I am Selen, Android developer by day, community supporter, and business management enthusiast by night. So also we have Ren. Ren is a software engineer in Android development, periodically 3D printing. And also we have Jane. Jane is with us today in the call. Jane is an Android engineer, product designer, and a tech community enthusiast. So here's our today's star, Gauri. So I would like to introduce you to her. She will be leading us today's event. Gauri is a Women Tech Maker ambassador, and she like working on apps that help people to has been in health and fitness space since 2018. In her spare time, she loves going on walks by the water, trying out new foods, and binge watching TV series. I think she likes Gilmore Girls. So I will pass to Gauri now. So yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet, and now we do.
Okay, awesome. Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about user navigation, which is our unit 3 in the Android Basics with Kotlin course that we are doing in our Android study group. Let's start with intents. An intent is an object representing some action to be performed. The most common use for an intent is to launch an activity. There are 2 types of intents, implicit and explicit. An explicit intent is highly specific, where you know the exact activity to be launched, which is often a screen within your own app. An implicit intent is a bit more abstract, where you tell the system the type of action, such as opening a link, composing an email, or making a phone call. And the system is responsible for figuring out how to fulfill the request. For example, when you click on the share icon on your Photos app, you see a list of apps that can handle this implicit intent of type action send, like Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter, etc. So in 2019, Jetpack navigation was introduced by Google, and the Android Jetpack's navigation component helps you implement navigation from simple button clicks to complex patterns such as app bars and the navigation drawer. The navigation component also ensures a consistent and predictable user experience by adhering to an established set of principles. Some of the benefits of using Jetpack navigation component are handling fragment transitions, handling up and back actions correctly by default, providing standardized resources for animations and transitions, implementing and handling deep linking, including navigation UI patterns such as navigation drawers and bottom navigation with minimal addition work. It also has a Gradle plugin, SafeArcs, that provides type safety when navigating and passing data between destinations. You can also scope a view model to a navigation graph to share UI-related data between the graph's destination. Jetpack navigation has 3 key parts. One is navigation graph, nav host, and nav controller. Navigation graph is an XML resource that contains all navigation related information in one centralized location. This includes all of the individual content areas within your app called destinations, as well as the possible paths that a user can take through your app called actions. Nav host is an empty container that displays destinations from your navigation graph. The navigation component contains a default nav host implementation, nav host fragment that displays fragment destinations. Your activity typically should contain a nav host. Nav controller is an object that manages app navigation within a nav host. The nav controller orchestrates the swapping of destinations in the nav host as user moves throughout your app. The navigation tag is the root of every navigation graph. It contains one or more destinations represented by activity tag or fragment tag elements. App start destination is an attribute that specifies the destination that is launched by default when the user first opens the app. And for the destinations, Android ID defines an ID for the fragment that you can use to reference the destination elsewhere in the XML and your code. Android name declares the fully qualified class name of the fragment to instantiate when you navigate to that destination. And the tool's layout specifies what layout should be shown in the graphical editor. On the left, we have the navigation graph with two fragments, letter list fragment and word list fragment. These two fragments are our destinations. The first fragment includes an action letter list fragment to word list fragment, which takes you to the second fragment. And the second fragment, the word list fragment, includes an argument with its type. We can also specify a default value for an argument here. On the right, we have the visual representation of the same information. The start destination is denoted with the home icon. You can visually edit navigation graphs or directly edit the underlying XML. As we briefly spoke about SafeArgs earlier, SafeArgs is a Gradle plugin which is applied in the app build.gradle file that provides type safety when navigating and passing data between destinations. You can add the argument name and type in the receiving destination in the navigation graph, as you can see on the top left. And in the receiving destinations Java or Kotlin code, you can retrieve the argument as shown in the top right. As you can see in the bottom picture, the old style code using intents to pass an argument is not type safe. We have removed the toString call, and still we are able to pass the argument. And this would lead in a runtime error. Instead, it's better to use the SafeArgs, as we would not get any runtime errors if wrong data type is passed. As you see in the second example, when we remove the toString call, the IDE throws an error right then, preventing us from any runtime errors. Upon using the argument tag, SafeArgs generates a class which typically is the fragment name appended by args. So the class here generated would be wordless fragment args, as our fragment name is wordless fragment. In your destinations receiving destinations code, we will use the get arguments method on this class from this class wordless fragment args to retrieve the bundle with its contents that we passed from the previous destination. So now we are ready to get set, navigate. A class is created for each destination where an action originates. So the name of this class is the name of the originating destination appended with the word directions. So here, for example, we have the originating destination name as letter list fragment. So the generated class would be called letter list fragments directions. This class has a method for each action defined in the originating destination. So here we have for our action, which was transitioning from letter list fragment to word list fragment, we have the method action letter list fragment to word list fragment in our letter list fragments directions class. And we will pass the argument letter to the action method. This method will return a nav directions object, which we are storing in the variable action here. And we will pass this nav directions object directly to the navigate function as shown in the example. And voila, we navigate to the next screen. So one thing we can also talk about is the pop behavior. In the Cupcake app from one of the code labs that we did in the unit 3, we are ordering cupcakes and the user can cancel order from any subsequent fragments, which were the flavor fragment, pickup fragment, and the summary fragment. If we just go back, when the user clicks on cancel, we would take the user to the previous fragment, which is not what is expected. Like if the user cancels from summary fragment, we would take them to pickup fragment. And from pickup fragment, we would take them to flavor fragment, which is not the right expected behavior. User should be taken to the start fragment, irrespective of where they are if they click on cancel. In order to facilitate this type of navigation component provides us with pop up to. We can specify till which fragment we need to pop up the backstack. In this case, we would set the property to start fragment. So whenever user clicks on cancel on either of the three fragments, they are taken to start fragment. So our words and cupcake apps that we did in Code Labs are very simple and don't need a nested graph. But often in real life applications, nested graphs are used to organize and reuse sections of your app's UI, such as a self-contained login flow or a checkout flow. Here you can see on the left that we have a root graph, and on the right, we have a graph we want to include. In the action to navigate to the second graph, the destination would be the ID of the included graph. And we can reference the action in our Kotlin or Java code to navigate to the start destination of the included graph. That was all that we had today. So if you have any questions, the floor is open. You can unmute or type in the chat.
Thank you so much, Gauri, for the amazing, valuable lesson today. So if you have any question, please let us know. You can write in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and just ask the question.
So, I mean, some of this is new for me, but can we add an activity as a destination in the nav graph?
Yeah, so we can add an activity as a destination. Typically, each activity has its own nav graph. So if you add an activity to a destination as a destination in the nav graph, it would launch the activity and trigger its own nav graph.
Thanks. Yeah, and folks, there are some notes also that have been shared previously, so on our Slack channel. And if you have any questions around it, anything you're curious about, or need some help or guidance, let's discuss it here. Thanks, Akasha.
So, can I ask a question that's kind of going backwards? It's not really navigation related, but it was something I'm thinking about, was on the layouts section. I was just, you know, as I was kind of coding my own stuff, I just thought, is there kind of a decision tree or something that tells you what layout to start with? Like, we learned a lot about the constraint, but I know so there's also, the relative. I've seen the frame, and the linear, I'm a little more familiar with that. And then I saw this something called a coordinator that I haven't really looked into yet. And I was just wondering, like, what would you normally start with a layout for a fragment? Like, what would you start with? or what would be the default? And how would you choose different layouts?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. These days, if you create a layout file, you would observe that by default, it opens as a constraint layout. So the short answer is you start with a constraint layout by default. And constraint layout has been added, like, I think since past 2-3 years or so. Before that, we just had linear layout and relative layout. So linear layout, as you must know, you must be knowing, is usually to display something linearly, either horizontally or vertically. And relative layout went a step further, where you could add your views in the layout in relation to each other. You could place them either on the left of each of the other view, on the right, or yeah. So what it helps is in flattening the layout. So you don't have like a lot of, let's say you wanted to have like a grid of 2x2 views. So instead of having 2 linear layouts which are horizontal, we could have a single relative layout, which would say like 1, 2, 3, 4. Assume that's how the views are. So on the second view, you could say, I want this view to be on the right of the first view. And on the third, you could say, I want this view to be on the bottom of the first view. And on the fourth view, you could say, I want this view to be on the bottom of the second view and on the right of the third view, right? So with this, you already have flattened your view hierarchy by, instead of 2 linear layouts, you're just using 1 relative layout. Constraint layout goes a step further, goes beyond that, and provides like helps you in flattening that layout further. So that's why by default you should use a constraint layout.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gauri, for your answer. Also, Jane added something like constraint layout helps to avoid many nested views. So thank you, Jane. I would like to ask you another question, Gauri. When is the pop-up to inclusive used?
Yeah, so we briefly, thanks Selen for that question. So we briefly looked at the pop-up to property, and in cases where we have like cyclic navigation. So for example, let's say in this, we had like the start fragment, flavor fragment, pickup fragment, and from pickup fragment, we had a navigation that went to start fragment again. So it would be like A, B, C, and then go back to A, the first fragment. So in that case, when we are going back to the first fragment, we want to say pop up to inclusive true. We want to set that to true. So what that does is, in that action, it will pop up all the fragments in between and go directly to the first fragment, which here is the start fragment. And also, because we have set the pop-up to inclusive, we will also pop up the existing start fragment. So there are so we can avoid having 2 copies of the same fragment on our backstack. So we'll just have 1 copy, and like this is like, so we usually have to use pop-up to inclusive when there's a cyclic navigation.
Thank you so much. Also, I have another question. Do you have any recommendations to learn navigation better for the new beginners?
I think along with the code labs that we have in our unit 3, there's also a separate navigation code lab that Google has, which has slightly different examples and which takes you through similar concepts, but has some additional concepts as well. So I would suggest that.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other question? And also, if you didn't part of our Android Study Club channel on the Slack, please participate that channel. We will send bi-weekly notes for units also in there. So we will plan to host more events like this in the future. So please attend the channel. If we have, do we have another question? I think we don't have.
Yeah, and we can always continue the discussion on our Slack channel as well. So,
Yes.
You know, if you go back and review some content and you come up with more questions, we can always have an async discussion.
Definitely, you can post it in the channel and somebody will answer to you there. So also Navati shared the link for the Slack channel for joining. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you have a great day. So yeah, see you soon and see you in Slack channel.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much, Gauri and Selen. And thank you, Jane. See ya.
Thank you.
See ya.
It's great. And I think as we go further, it's going to be more helpful as we get into more complex stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Anna.
joining.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.